Part 51. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 501. After Shen Shuwei kissed Xiao Jinyan, she stood up and smiled at him. I'm going back. I'll come back tomorrow night. Lin Xian finally reacted. Seeing that she was about to leave, he reached out and grabbed her wrist. Shen Shuwei's eyebrows curved. My husband, have you changed your mind? Do you want me to stay? Lin Xian, no. Shen Shuwei looked at the hand holding her wrist with some disappointment, and asked in confusion, then why is my husband holding my hand? Lin Xian said coldly, men and women should not be intimate, don't you understand? Shen Shuwei sighed helplessly. In his eyes, they were not husband and wife, so he thought that a good night kiss was an act of deviance. But in her eyes, they were a loving couple, so what was a kiss? Of course I understand, my husband, take a rest first, I'm going back. Shen Shuwei yawned after she finished speaking. She stayed up late every night during this period. Although she would make up for it during the day, she still felt that she didn't get enough sleep. During this period, Shen Shuwei has been coming late at night. It was late at night after the treatment. I couldn't see her before, but now I can see that she looks tired. She must be very tired. When Shen Shuwei came out of the house, she saw Qin Xiao coming out from the dark. Since he came out from behind her and scared her last time, Qin Xiao always came out in front of her. Master, has he not remembered yet? Shen Shuwei shook her head. Thinking back to Xiao Jinyan's reaction during this period, he didn't look like a person with amnesia, because people with amnesia don't think who they are, but are curious about who they are. I don't think he has amnesia. Qin Xiao asked, Master, if he doesn't have amnesia, then what is it? I feel that there is something wrong with his memory. Shen Shuwei thought hard but didn't come to a conclusion, but she felt that Xiao Jinyan didn't hate her now. There is something wrong with the memory. Qin Xiao was anxious, but there was nothing he could do. On the day of the water splashing festival, Shen Shuwei was sleeping soundly in bed and was awakened by a knock on the door. She only knew that today was the water splashing festival after hearing the maid say that people in the city would go to the square to splash water and pray for blessings. After listening to this, Shen Shuwei lay on the couch and closed her eyes to continue sleeping. Playing in the water is worse than sleeping. The maid asked in confusion, Dr. Shen, are you not going? Shen Shuwei lay on the couch motionless, her voice lazy, no. The maid stared at Dr. Shen for a long time. After getting along with him for these days, the maid also understood Dr. Shen. He is a very good person, but he just likes to sleep. He never stands when he can sit, and never sits when he can lie down. Another hobby is eating. The maid stood up and went out when she saw that Dr. Shen was not interested. Seeing the third master at the door, she stepped forward and bowed, Third master, Dr. Shen is resting inside. He said he is not interested in the water splashing festival. I'll go in and take a look. Wang Jingyuan waved away the maid, then pushed open the door and walked in. He saw Dr. Shen on the couch, just as the maid said, he was resting on the couch. Dr. Shen, today is the annual water splashing festival, and there are many fruits and cakes. Are you sure you don't want to take a look? When Shen Shuwei heard the words cakes and fruits, she opened her eyes immediately and saw Wang Jingyuan looking at her with a smile. Really? Wang Jingyuan smiled and said, of course it's true. Why didn't you say it earlier? Shen Shuwei climbed up from the couch neatly. Wang Jingyuan looked at the person who was still asleep the previous second, and put on his shoes in high spirits the next second. He couldn't help laughing. I thought Dr. Shen knew about this. How would I know the customs here? Shen Shuwei put on her shoes, picked up the sleeping Sichuan, and urged, let's go. Okay. Wang Jingyuan took Shen Shuwei out. The sun was shining outside. Shen Shuwei followed Wang Jingyuan out of the imperial city, and heard the noise of people from afar. The sound of stringed instruments could not be heard, and there were people everywhere at a glance. She glanced around and saw nothing to eat. She reached out and poked Wang Jingyuan. "Where is the food?" Wang Jingyuan chuckled, "Follow me." Okay, Shen Shuwei followed Wang Jingyuan to the high platform on one side. The high platform was divided into 3 layers, and many people were sitting on it. She saw Wang Jingyu and Wang Leiwen sitting on it, and a man about 50 years old was sitting in the middle. His clothes were moon white with gold inlays, and the scarf on his head was also inlaid with gold. It is not difficult to guess that this man is the patriarch of the Sing Miao tribe. This is the first time she has seen him after coming here for so long. Wang Jingyuan brought Shen Shuwei to the patriarch, put his right hand on his left chest to salute, and introduced, "Father, this is Dr. Shen who treated the child." Shen Shuwei imitated Wang Jingyuan, raised his right hand and put it on his left chest to salute, "Patriarch." The patriarch has been busy for a while and has not taken the time to meet this great Dr. Shen. Now seeing that he is so young, his eyes are full of surprise. "Dr. Shen, don't be restrained, eat and drink as you please." Shen Shuwei bowed and "Thank you for the hospitality, clan leader." Wang Jingyuan took Shen Shuwei to sit next to Wang Leiwen. Shen Shuwei looked at the dozens of plates of cakes and fruits in front of her, and couldn't wait to pick up a piece of cake she had never seen before and put it into her mouth and took a bite. It was cool and refreshing, a little sweet, and tasted good. Wang Jingyuan picked up the wine pot and poured her a glass of wine. "This is a sweet wine made from fruits, you try it?" Shen Shuwei looked at the sweet wine in the glass cup. The color was light red. She took it up with curiosity and took a sip. It was sour and sweet, and cold in the mouth. It should be chilled. Wang Leiwen saw the snowball in Dr. Shen's arms. She turned her head and took the clan leader's arm, and said coquettishly, "Father, Dr. Shen has a pet, and my daughter likes it very much." Hearing this, the patriarch looked at the pet in Dr. Shen's arms. He took a quick glance at it and saw that it was a snow-white cat with bright blue eyes. No wonder his daughter liked it. Dr. Shen. Hearing this, Shen Shuwei raised his head and looked at the clan leader, ate the fruit in his mouth, and then asked, "What's the matter, clan leader?" The patriarch smiled and said, "My daughter likes your pet very much. How much do you think it can be sold for?" If it were someone else, for the sake of the clan leader, he would give the pet to Wang Leiwen for free. However, Shen Shuwei hugged Xuetuan tightly and refused simply, "Clan leader, this is my pet, not for sale. I already rejected Princess Leun last time." The clan leader's smile froze when he heard this. As a clan leader, how could he ever be rejected? Wang Leiwen did not expect that Dr. Shen would not even give her father's face. She continued to coquettishly say, "Father, my daughter really likes him." The patriarch looked at his daughter's expectant eyes and couldn't bear to let her down. He had to speak again, "Since Dr. Shen doesn't want money, can I exchange it for something else?" Shen Shuwei put down the glass cup in his hand and said seriously, "Clan leader, in your eyes, snow is a pet, but in my eyes, it is like family. I have no idea of selling or giving it away, let alone taking snowballs to exchange for something." The patriarch was once again humiliated, and his face looked a little ugly, but Dr. Shen was unwilling to change, and he could not use force to exert pressure. Wang Leiwen reluctantly grabbed the patriarch's arm and continued to act coquettishly, "Father." Wang Jing was surprised that his sister was so unreasonable, so he said, "Sister, a gentleman does not take what others like. If you like cats, I will buy one for you tomorrow." Wang Leiwen noticed that her brother was facing outsiders and said dissatisfiedly, "I just like Dr. Shen's pet Snowball. Can you find an identical cat?" Wang Jingyuan said, "You are making trouble unreasonably. How can there be exactly the same cat? Third brother, my sister likes it. Dr. Shen is not a stingy person." A gentleman has the beauty of an adult. It's just a cat. How about giving it to my sister? The person who spoke was Wang Jingxian, the second son of the patriarch, who looked at him with a doting look on his face. Younger sister. Second brother still loves me, unlike some people who only help outsiders, Wang Leiwen snorted. I'm neither a gentleman nor generous. I'm just an ordinary person. You think too highly of me, Shen Shuwei said confidently. No one present expected that Dr. Shen would belittle himself in this way, leaving people speechless for a moment. Wang Jingyuan looked away and looked at Shen Shuwei. Her indifferent expression showed that not everyone could blatantly reject the clan leader, so he still admired her. The drums sounded and the water splashing session began. Both the royal family and the nobles went to the center of the square to splash water and pray. Wang Leiwen also ran down happily because she wanted to pray for Lin Xian. Wang Jingyuan asked Shen Shuwei, splashing water to pray for blessings, are you going? Shen Shuwei shook her head simply, no, I'll go back after eating the pastries and fruits. Wang Jingyuan was stunned for a moment when he heard this, and then laughed out loud. She really only came here for a few plates of pastries and fruits. Then I'll go down. Shen Chu nodded slightly. Wang Jingyuan, as the third master of the Xin Miao ethnic group, will definitely participate in splashing water and praying for blessings. After Shen Shuwei finished eating the pastries and fruits, he took out his handkerchief and wiped his mouth, then picked up the snowball and returned to the imperial city. Back in the guest room, Shen Shuwei put the snowball aside and continued to sleep on the couch, because he had to stay up late to treat his illness. Just when Shen Chu was half asleep, he suddenly heard the sound of fighting. Snowball exclaimed, meow. Shen Chu slightly raised his head and rubbed his eyes, then saw the maid running in a hurry. Dr. Shen, something happened. Problem occurs? Shen Shuwei sat up and got off the couch, put on his shoes and came out of the house. He saw Qin Xiao and a group of guards fighting in the yard. She yelled, what the hell is going on? Qin Xiao took the time to reply, sir, they want to arrest you. After they all stopped, Shen Shuwei asked doubtfully, why are you arresting me? The leading guard said, the third master suddenly fainted. Please ask Dr. Shen to come with us. If it weren't for his precise words, Shen Shuwei would have thought they were joking. He was fine before I came back. Why did he suddenly faint? We are just following orders. The leading guard waved his hand to arrest people. A group of guards gathered around again, and when Qin Xiao made a move, Shen Shuwei stopped him. This is someone else's territory. They can be poisoned, so you can't touch them head on. When Qin Xiao heard this, he stared at the guard who was walking in front of him, unwilling to let him go without any help. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 502. Shen Shuwei thought that the guard was taking her to see Wang Jingyuan for medical treatment, but halfway there she realized that it was not the way to Wang Jingyuan's room. She asked the leading guard, are you going to the third master's room? The guard snorted, of course not to third master's room, this is the way to the solitary room. Shen Chu glanced around slightly. No wonder he was going further and further away. It turned out that he was going to the solitary confinement room. She stopped and said, didn't you say that third master fainted? Isn't it time to save people before the delay? The doctor has been invited for treatment. What if you attack the third master again? Go faster and don't waste time, the guard said impatiently. Is the doctor's medical skill good? The third master was in coma before, and it was useless for you to invite so many doctors. I think it would be better for you to let me go and have a look to avoid anything happening. Shen Shuwei was worried about Wang Jingyuan's condition. Through her medical treatment during this period, she knew his physical condition very well and it was always stable and it was impossible for him to suddenly faint. Unless there is an incentive. Why are you talking so much nonsense? This is not something you should worry about. Leave now. When the guards were about to take action, they were stopped by Qin Xiao. He glanced at the 4 guards in front of him coldly. Who dares to touch my young master? Qin Xiao is the prince's personal bodyguard. He has been through life and death countless times, and his look in his eyes is enough to make people fearful. The guards looked at each other. They all had seen Qin Xiao's power, so they didn't dare to take action. Shen Chuwei and Qin Xiao were locked in a closed room with nothing in it, not even a bed. Qin Xiao looked at Shen Chuwei and saw that she was staring at the small window on the door. He walked over and said, "Master, what are you looking at?" Shen Chu said softly, "I'm worried about Wang Jingyuan's physical condition. Sudden fainting is not a trivial matter. Without treatment, it will be very serious." Qin Xiao said, "Master, they should be fine after they hired a doctor. The most important thing now is how we get out." Shen Chu sighed slightly. If the doctors here are useful, they don't have to pay huge sums of money for medical treatment. At this time, Wang Jingyuan's room was crowded with people. 3 doctors took turns treating Wang Jingyuan, but it still didn't help. The patriarch paced anxiously back and forth in front of the bed, glancing at his youngest son on the bed from time to time. He saw that his face was pale and he was very distressed. "What happened to my son?" The doctor said, "Patriarch, the 3rd master is very weak and cannot be cured by ordinary medicine." The patriarch questioned, "How is this possible? My son's health has gradually improved in the past few days, why is he suddenly so weak?" The doctor pondered for a moment and then explained, "Clan leader, it may be that Dr. Shen used strong medicine. On the surface, his body seems to be getting better, but in fact it is not the case." The patriarch slapped the table angrily, "Dr. Shen, how dare you use strong medicine on my son?" Wang Jingxian glanced at his younger brother on the bed, and took a step forward to suggest, "Father, that Dr. Shen's origin is unknown. From the child's point of view, he is just cheating on food and drink. Scammers like this should be paraded on the streets as a warning to others." Wang Jingyu said, "Father, I don't think Dr. Shen is cheating on you." Wang Jingxian snorted coldly, "Brother, you said Dr. Shen didn't lie about eating and drinking. If he didn't use strong medicine, which caused his body to be depleted, why did he suddenly faint?" Wang Jingyu was speechless for a moment. He thought for a while and said, "Father, this matter still needs to be investigated carefully. If Dr. Shen is mistakenly blamed, my brother's life will be in danger." The patriarch listened to the arguments of his 2 sons and was unsure for a moment. "I'll leave this matter to you to investigate. Be sure to find out clearly." Wang Jingyu said, "My child understands." After the doctor took the medicine, Wang Jingyuan woke up for a while and fell into sleep again. When Wang Leiwen learned that Dr. Shen had been arrested, she immediately brought her guards to Dr. Shen's residence. She pushed the door open hard, glanced at it, and saw the snow on the couch. She raised the corners of her lips and said, "Now, you belong to me." Wang Leiwen said and stepped forward to hug Xuetuan. As soon as he stretched out his hand, Xuetuan scratched his paw. Ah, Wang Leiwen couldn't avoid it and was scratched 3 bloody marks on the back of his hand. After Xuetuan finished scratching, he jumped down from the couch, rubbed oil on his solace and ran away. Wang Leiwen covered the back of her hands and saw Xuetuan running away. She was furious. When she saw the motionless guard at the side, she said angrily, "What are you still standing there for? Get it back quickly." "Yes, Princess." A group of guards took the order and hurriedly chased her out. Wang Leiwen looked down at the back of his hand. 3 blood marks were clearly visible on the back of his hand, which was as white as jade. "This princess has fallen in love with you to give you face. Just like your master, you have no shame in giving face." When Xuetuan found out that someone was chasing him, he knew that the bad woman wanted to catch him for doing bad things. He instinctively ran towards Xiao Jinyan and disappeared after a while. The 4 guards were looking for Xue Tuan everywhere in the courtyard and waterside pavilion, but there was no trace of Xue Tuan. Wang Leiwen ran out of the house angrily and found that the guards were empty-handed and had not caught the snowball. "A bunch of trash, what's the use of raising you? What are you still waiting for? Why don't you find it for me quickly?" Wang Leiwen has been spoiled and domineering since she was a child, and the guards also understand her temper. They dare not speak out when she is angry, but they lower their heads and continue to look for Sichuan. Snow Tuan ran all the way into the yard and saw Xiao Jinyan. It ran over quickly and jumped into his arms. Lin Xian was drinking tea and eating snacks, expecting Shen Shuwei to bring him food in the evening. Thinking about the meals he eats every night is what he looks forward to most in the day. Suddenly he found Xue Tuan jumping into his arms. He was drinking tea and asked, "Is she here?" Although Lin Xian has recovered his sight, he just doesn't want others to know, so his eyes are still covered with gauze. After waiting for a while, Shen Shuwei didn't come in. He frowned. "Dr. Shen." Miao Xue Tuan raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, indicating that Shen Shuwei didn't come, only it did. Lin Xian waited for a while and made sure that Shen Shuwei had not come. He touched Xue Tuan's plush head. "Where is your master?" Miao Xue Tuan said that he didn't know. Lin Xian had an inexplicable bad feeling in his heart. Just when Lin Xian was confused, he heard footsteps. These footsteps were too familiar to him. They were Wang Leiwen. The snowball in my arm suddenly jumped out of my arms and hid under the bed. As soon as she hit it, Wang Leiwen walked in. She looked around a few times, looking everywhere but not in the yard where Lin Xian lived. Lin Xian called out, "Princess Leiwen." When Wang Leiwen heard Lin Xian calling her, she changed from her previous coquettish and domineering voice, and her voice immediately became softer. "Lin Xian, it's me." Lin Xian asked doubtfully, "Isn't today the water splashing festival? Why are you here?" When Wang Leiwen saw Lin Xian, she immediately forgot about looking for Sichuan. She smiled and sat in front of Lin Xian. "I just came back from the square, you know. I just prayed for you, hoping that you will recover soon." "Lin Xiandao, thank you." Wang Leiwen smiled shyly, thinking of Dr. Shen. Her expression immediately changed. "By the way, that Dr. Shen is a liar and his medical skills are not good. But don't worry, I won't give up treating you." Lin Xian naturally didn't believe that Shen Shuwei was a liar when he heard this. She had cured her own eyes and had superb medical skills. How could she be a liar? "Why do you say that?" Wang Leiwen said, "My third brother suddenly fainted. It was Dr. Shen who used strong medicine from the beginning, so my third brother suddenly got better. After the effect of the medicine, he returned to his original state." Lin Xian frowned. How could a pure person like Shen Shuwei do such a thing? Without waiting for Lin Xian to ask, Wang Leiwen said, "I have some work to do beforehand, so you can rest." Wang Leiwen said, covering the back of her hand and walking out. She didn't believe that a cat could disappear out of thin air. As soon as Wang Leiwen left, Xue Tuan got out from under the bed and jumped into Xiao Jinyan's arms again, looking for comfort. Lin Xian noticed Sichuan's behavior and wondered if it was hiding from Wang Leiwen, otherwise it would run out as soon as she walked away. After listening to Wang Leiwen's words, his bad premonition came to his mind again. This premonition didn't come until night, when he discovered that Shen Shuwei usually came to deliver food at this time, but he didn't come today. After waiting for about half an hour, Shen Shuwei still didn't come. Lin Xian couldn't help but feel worried. Did something happen to Shen Shuwei? He lifted the gauze over his eyes, placed the snowball on the ground, and stood up with the help of his wheelchair. After this period of treatment, he was able to stand up and walk. Shen Shuwei refused to let him stand up, saying that his bones had not grown properly and if he forced himself to walk, the consequences would be more serious. Xue Tuan raised his head and saw Xiao Jinyan standing up. He rolled his eyes and walked out. Lin Xian held the table and came to the back of the door, picked up the rarely used crutch, and slowly followed Xue Tuan out. He remembered Shen Chuwei saying that Sichuan was different from other pets in that its nose was very sensitive, it didn't like strangers, and it was very good at leading the way and finding people. Lin Xian held the door frame and came out, and saw a white figure running towards the door in the night, indicating that Shen Chuwei was not in his guest room. He frowned and chased after her, because his leg injury had not healed and every step he took would cause excruciating pain. Don't use force on your legs during this period, otherwise it will lead to disability, but it will be too late. Shen Chuwei's words rang in Lin Xian's mind, and he hesitated. While hesitating, his steps also stopped. If he went to look for Shen Chuwei regardless, others might find out that he could see. It may also lead to lifelong disability. If his legs cannot move freely, how can he leave here? Lin Xian has always had an obsession in his heart, that is, to leave here and go to Nanzhao Kingdom. He didn't know what he was doing in Nanzhao, but he kept reminding him in the back of his mind. P.S. I'm asking for monthly tickets to climb the list first, and I plan to do a small update in a few days. Then I would like to thank you all for reading the latest chapter, which is over 1 million words long, which is really not easy. I saw Beazai's comment today and mentioned the shortcomings of the plot of Seen Miao Tribe. It is indeed the shortcomings of Gongzi's writing. He has been in a bad state recently and this plot was not written well. I will work hard to write it next. End this plot as early as possible and move on to the next plot. Young Master is preparing a new book. I would like to ask you, what themes are you looking forward to in Young Master's new book? After determining the subject matter, the Master will open a pre-collection, and the treasures can collect and add bookshelf in advance. Good night, babies. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 503. After running out, Sichuan looked back and found that Xiao Jinyan didn't follow him. He ran back with doubt. Seeing Xiao Jinyan, Sichuan raised his head and looked at him, calling him, Miao. Signaling Xiao Jinyan to follow it. Lin Xian came back to his senses and looked down at Sichuan, who had come back. In the night, his blue eyes were unusually bright. Miao. Sichuan stretched out his claws and scratched his legs, as if wondering why he didn't leave. Lin Xian pursed his lips and watched Sichuan's actions. He roughly guessed its intention, but he was still hesitant in his heart. His legs were too important to him, and he couldn't gamble with his legs. At this time in the confinement room, Shen Chuwei was worried about Wang Jingyuan's condition during the day, and worried that Xiao Jinyan would starve if he didn't eat dinner and waited for her to deliver food at night, and worried that he would feel uncomfortable if the medicine on his legs was not changed. She looked around the confinement room and looked at the window behind her. The window was not big, and she should be able to climb out with her petite figure. Qin Xiao saw Shen Chuwei staring at the window and guessed her thoughts immediately. Master, do you want to climb out from here? Shen Chuwei retracted her gaze and looked at Qin Xiao. Well, His Highness will be anxious if he can't wait for me. Qin Xiao is also knowledgeable and knows that the window is made of iron and needs tools to open. If you use violence to remove the window, the guards outside will definitely find it. Shen Chuwei took out a dagger from her waist and said proudly, I have a dagger. She found this dagger in the space. When she forgot to bring a fruit knife when she went out, she used the dagger to cut fruit. She also used this dagger when eating steak, and it was easy to cut steak. The disadvantage is that every time she uses a dagger, it will attract frequent sidelong glances from others. Qin Xiao looked at the dagger in Shen Chuwei's hand. The pattern on the scabbard was complicated and didn't look like what the Xia should have, but he could see that the dagger was not made of ordinary bronze. He raised his head and looked at Shen Shuwei, and saw her confident eyes, and felt it necessary to remind her. Ordinary daggers can't cut through iron windows. I know, my dagger is very sharp, you'll know after trying. Shen Shuwei was not sure whether she could cut through the iron windows. How could she know if she didn't try? Qin Xiao felt that what Shen Shuwei said made sense. He came under the window, bent down, supported himself on the ground with both hands, and used himself as a stool. Master, step on the subordinate's back, it's more convenient. Shen Shuwei didn't pretend. She supported the wall with one hand before climbing on Qin Xiao's back. She found it was unusually stable. After stepping on it, her hand just reached the iron window. She pulled out the dagger and started cutting from the root of the iron window pillar. She used all her strength. Unexpectedly, the iron pillar was cut off. At the same time, she also saw what it meant to cut iron like mud. She happily said to Qin Xiao, I cut it off. Cut it off? Qin Xiao showed surprise. The dagger that can cut iron is not an ordinary dagger. It is a treasure that can cut iron like mud. Shen Shuwei spent a while to cut all the iron pillars of the iron window. When climbing out, she still stepped on Qin Xiao's back. During the climb, Shen Shuwei felt a piercing pain in her lower back, as if she was scratched by something sharp. She didn't bother to check what it was. When she climbed out of the window, she had to jump down directly because there was no place to step on. She didn't know how to do Qinggong, so this height was considered very high for her. When she touched the ground, she could feel pain. The window was too small, and Qin Xiao was tall, so he couldn't climb out at all. He was worried about Shen Shuwei's safety and was sweating profusely. You stay inside first, and I'll bring you food when I come back, Shen Shuwei said and walked into the dark night. Qin Xiao kissed Shen Shuwei and watched her leave. No matter how worried he was, he couldn't do anything. Shen Shuwei went straight to the kitchen. It was too late to cook rice and fry vegetables now. There was fresh corn in the space, so she took out a few. The corn was fresh and tender and easy to cook. A total of 10 were cooked. While the corn was cooking, she took out instant noodles from the space and cooked them with eggs. When frying eggs, she accidentally dripped water into the oil pan because she was in a hurry. The hot oil splashed on the back of her hand, causing her to scream in pain. This was the first time she cooked in such a hurry, and she still didn't bother to apply the burn ointment. After a while, the steaming hot noodles were cooked. They were served in a large bowl and put into the food box. The bowl was large so it was not easy to spill. The corn was also cooked at this time. After rinsing it with cold water, it was put into the food box. Shen Shuwei couldn't wait to rush to the guest room with the food box, but she couldn't walk too fast for fear that the soup would spill. If she walked too slowly, she was afraid that the noodles would clump and taste bad. When she came to the guest room with the food box, she saw Xiao Jinyan in the garden. He was leaning on the crutches with both hands, and he looked like he was going to find someone. Shen Shuwei curved his eyebrows and went to meet him. Before Lin Xian made up his mind, he saw a figure walking towards the side from a distance. When he saw the delicate face clearly in the moonlight, he was stunned. Sichuan saw Shen Shuwei and called out excitedly, "Meow." Shen Shuwei walked closer, not paying attention to Sichuan. She asked him with a smile, "Are you going to see me, my husband?" Lin Xian's heart fell when he saw her coming, but he felt a little guilty at the moment. He wanted to find her, but he hesitated. "Why are you here now?" "Something happened, let's go in first and talk while eating." Shen Shuwei saw that she was leaning on the crutches with both hands, and said, "Stand still, I'll take the things in and come over to help you." Lin Xian was about to say no, but Shen Shuwei had already walked in with the lunch box and ran out. Shen Shuwei ran to Xiao Jinyan in one breath, took his hand and put it on her shoulder, and put most of his weight on her. Try not to use your legs, just put your weight on me. Lin Xian lowered his eyes and looked at Shen Shuwei, who was much shorter than him and petite. When he heard her say that, he felt even more guilty. Shen Shuwei took 2 steps and found that Xiao Jinyan was standing still. She raised her head and looked at him, her eyes full of confusion. "Husband, what's wrong with you?" Lin Xian retracted her gaze with a guilty look. "Nothing." "Then let's go in first, otherwise the noodles will be clumped and not taste good." "Yeah." Lin Xian walked into the house with the help of Shen Shuwei and sat back in the wheelchair. Shen Shuwei took out noodles from the lunch box and put them in front of Xiao Jinyan. "Something happened today, and I didn't have time to cook. I cooked noodles and corn. You can eat them first." Lin Xian looked at the steaming noodles in front of him, and then looked at the corn beside him. He had never seen them before. But at this time, he was really hungry. He picked up some noodles with chopsticks, blew them cool, and put them into his mouth. He found that they were better than any noodles he had ever eaten. Shen Shuwei was also hungry at this time. She didn't care to talk. She picked up some noodles, blew them cool a few times, and then put them into her mouth. She chewed them twice and swallowed them into her stomach. Lin Xian ate 2 mouthfuls of noodles, raised his head and looked at Shen Shuwei. "Is the accident you mentioned related to Wang Jingyuan?" Shen Shuwei had just taken a big mouthful of noodles and didn't have time to swallow it. She could only puff up her cheeks and said, "Well, Wang Jingyuan suddenly fainted. They thought it was me, so they arrested me and Qin Xiao." Lin Xian didn't expect that they would arrest Shen Shuwei directly. He thought that if she cured the person, everything would be fine. "Is the matter settled now?" Shen Shuwei shook her head. "It's not settled yet. I was afraid that my husband would be hungry if he didn't have dinner, so I sneaked out. I have to go back later." Lin Xian was stunned for a moment. "You sneaked out?" Shen Shuwei nodded. "Yes," Lin Xian asked again, "just to bring me food." "Not only that, I have to change your medicine, otherwise you will feel uncomfortable." Shen Shuwei lowered her head and continued to slurp noodles. She picked up the ham sausage and took a big bite. Lin Xian was stunned. He didn't expect that she was locked up thinking that he would be hungry and uncomfortable, and then she tried to sneak out to bring him food. This made him feel guilty about whether to go to her. She was just a delicate woman. Shen Shuwei was probably very hungry and ate a little hurriedly. She picked up the bowl and drank a few mouthfuls of soup. Lin Xian saw another bean-sized blister on the back of her fair hand. "What's wrong with your hand?" Shen Shuwei glanced at the back of her hand. She was too busy to notice it just now, but now she found that there was a blister where the oil splashed. "It was splashed by hot oil when I was frying a poached egg." Lin Xian could roughly guess that she was in a hurry and got burned in a panic. Her hand was as white as jade, and the burned part was too conspicuous. "Why don't you apply ointment?" "I can't take care of it. I'll talk about it after I finish eating." Shen Shuwei lowered her head and continued to eat noodles. Now nothing is more important than filling her stomach. Lin Xian stared at the blister on the back of her hand for a long time. This meal was hard to swallow. After eating, Shen Shuwei handed him a corn. Xiao Jinyan, who didn't remember her, also didn't remember the taste of corn. "My husband, try the corn." Lin Xian raised his head and looked at Shen Shuwei, as if it wasn't her who escaped from the confinement room, so calmly came to bring him food and ate with him. He took the corn. "Tonight is too urgent, so I won't do acupuncture. I'll change the medicine for you, and I'll go back after that." Shen Shuwei squatted down in front of him and rolled up his trouser legs neatly. Lin Xian said, "You finally got out, and you're going back. Are you waiting to be caught if you don't go back? This is the Xin Miao tribe, who are good at poisoning. I'm just a doctor. If I anger them and they poison me, I can only wait to die. Besides, Qin Xiao is still inside. If I don't go back, they will definitely not let Qin Xiao go. Shen Shuwei said without raising her head, and her hands did not stop moving. Lin Xian felt mixed emotions, and then he realized that everything Shen Shuwei did was because of a face similar to her husband. After changing the medicine, Shen Shuwei helped Xiao Jinyan to bed to rest. She raised her hand to wipe the sweat from her forehead. "Husband, I'll go back first." Shen Shuwei turned around to clean up the dishes. Lin Xian looked sideways at the busy figure in the room and saw a red mark on her lower back, which was unusually eye-catching on her moon-white clothes. "Dr. Shen, why is there blood on your body? Babies, please support me with monthly tickets and climb the monthly ticket list. Recommended completed articles, free for members. Run wild around the paranoid Mr. Fu. The wife in Mr. Qin's arms is a big boss. Madam, your boss is super paranoid." Completed Ancient Chinese. After I traveled through the book, I spoiled the violent Regent King. Free article. Addicted to partiality, my reborn wife is so sweet. Good afternoon, babies. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommended tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 504. When Shen Shuwei heard the words, she stopped what she was doing and looked down at her clothes. She didn't see any blood. She pulled at the hem of her clothes and sleeves and saw no blood. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan doubtfully. "Where is the blood? I didn't see it." Lin Xian held the bed and sat up. Because his legs were inconvenient, his movements were somewhat restricted and his movements were slower. "Come here." Shen Shuwei walked to the bed with doubts, and Lin Xian grabbed her wrist and pulled her over. With her back facing him, she saw a red patch on her lower back. When she touched it, it was wet and sticky. There is no doubt about the blood. Not only was there blood, but the clothes were also scratched. He raised his head and looked at Shen Shuwei. "Are you hurt?" Shen Shuwei stretched out her hand to the place where Lin Xian touched it. She didn't know how hard she was to control it at first, so she pinched it. The pain made her groan, hiss. When Lin Xian heard her cry out in pain, he knew that this place was injured. He said in a deep voice, "Don't you even know you are injured?" Shen Shuwei thought about it carefully, and then thought about what happened when she climbed out of the window. Because she was in a hurry, she ignored the sudden pain in her waist. "It seemed like I was scratched by something when I climbed up the iron window. I forgot about it after I came out." Lin Xian frowned. "Can you forget this?" Shen Chu said softly, "I was afraid that I would be too anxious to wait, and I was afraid that you would be hungry, so I forgot about it." Lin Xian looked at the delicate woman in front of him. He would not starve to death if he didn't eat. He was anxious, but he was still worried about his legs and hesitated between looking for her. Shen Shuwei came to the table, rummaged in the medical box for a while, took out disinfectant, medicine, and gauze, then returned to the bed and put the things on the bed. "Husband, help me bandage it." Lin Xian opened his eyes wide. "Me?" In Lin Xian's eyes, they were ordinary friends at best. Besides, there were differences between men and women. To bandage the wound, you would definitely have to take off your clothes, which made him a little embarrassed. "I can't see behind me. If my husband doesn't help me, no one will help me." In Shen Shuwei's eyes, he was her husband, and it was only natural for him to bandage his wounds. Lin Xian looked at the blood on her lower back and hesitated for a long time, but finally agreed. After all, she was injured because she escaped to give him food. "Take off your clothes." Okay. Shen Chu untied his girdle without a trace of hesitation, took off his outer shirt neatly, placed it on the chair, and then took off his middle coat. Lin Xian stared blankly as she neatly threw away her girdle and then her coat, not intending to treat him like an outsider. But it soon became clear that Shen Shuwei regarded him as her husband, and it was normal for her to take off her clothes in front of her husband. But he's not. When he saw her unbuttoning her middle coat to reveal her pink belly band, he was completely stunned. The scene in front of him seemed to have some kind of attraction that made him unable to look away. Before she had time to react, she took off her middle coat, and her fair skin was dazzling under the light. Lin Xian found himself staring at others and immediately turned his head to look away. Although he was not a gentleman, the fact that Shen Shuwei was so kind and dedicated to his husband and woman made him feel guilty. He clearly knew that he was not her husband and should keep his distance from her, but he still enjoyed the benefits brought by this face and her goodness. Shen Shuwei sat on the bed with her back to Xiao Jinyan. She picked up the wet wipe and handed it to him. "Husband, wipe off the blood stains first and disinfect them. I suspect it was scratched by the nails on the window. It will easily become inflamed if not disinfected." When Lin Xian heard this, he glanced at Shen Shuwei and saw her fair back. Although she was thin, she was not that skinny and beautiful, but rather slender and voluptuous. He found that he had been looking at it for too long and hurriedly landed on the injured area. A cut was made on his lower back with a sharp weapon. She pinched it and it started to bleed again. The bright red blood stung his eyes. If she hadn't been in a hurry to deliver him food, she wouldn't have had to climb up the window and get hurt. He didn't want to look any further, so he took the wipe in her hand and tried his best to keep his eyes on the wound. The blood on the skin was easy to wipe clean, but he didn't dare to wipe it around the wound for fear of hurting her. The white waistband was also stained red with blood. Shen Shuwei felt that the wipes were almost done, so she picked up the disinfectant and handed it to him. "Husband, this is the disinfectant. Normally I don't feel embarrassed when I call him husband, but now when I call him husband, it feels awkward and strange at the same time." Lin Xian raised his head and saw the snow-white skin. He lowered his head again and looked at her slender waist. His throat rolled up and down with difficulty. He took the disinfectant from her hand without saying a word and disinfected the wound according to her instructions. Shen Chu frowned slightly and would hum a few words when it hurt. Lin Xian heard her hum and moved slightly, thinking that he was not gentle enough and hurt her, so he softened his movements again. Disinfection is a big project, and it is relatively simple to spray pesticides later. Lin Xian picked up the gauze to bandage her, and the movement around it gave him the illusion of holding her in his arms. They were so close to each other that he could smell the fragrance of her body, which was like the fragrance of peach blossoms. Lin Xian woke up suddenly and was shocked to find out what he had done. In order to avoid such a thing happening again, he speeded up the bandaging. After the bandage was finished, Lin Xian let out a long breath, as if he had completed a major project. He looked away and said, "It's already bandaged. Put on your clothes." Yes. Shen Chu stood up slightly, picked up the middle coat on the side and put it on. When he saw Xiao Jinyan looking down at his legs, he couldn't help but feel worried. "Husband, are your legs uncomfortable?" Lin Xian replied with 2 words without raising his head, "No." Shen Shuwei was a little worried. "Then why do you keep staring at your legs?" "Lin Xian, get dressed first and then talk." Shen Shuwei was in a hurry to go back and continued to get dressed without asking any questions. He got dressed in a short time. "My husband is fine, then I will leave." Seeing that she was about to leave, Lin Xian grabbed her wrist, with a flash of worry in his eyes. "Do you really want to go back to the solitary room?" "Well, Qin Xiao is still waiting for me. He will be in danger if he doesn't go back. Also, this is the imperial city. It's hard for me to get out if I don't go back. It's better to go back so as not to anger them." Shen Shuwei thought of Wang Jingyuan, and she said worriedly, "I want to visit Wang Jingyuan to see why he fainted. If he is fine, I will be fine." Lin Xian frowned. "I don't think you look like someone who is short of money. You know it's dangerous to enter the imperial city, why do you still come in?" Shen Shuwei said seriously, if I don't come in, I'll miss the opportunity to see you. Although it's dangerous, I'm not afraid that your husband is here. I'm just afraid that I won't be able to see you. Lin Xian was stunned, knowing that she was talking about his husband, but he still felt moved when he heard it. I have to leave quickly so that my husband can have a good rest. Shen Shuwei didn't waste any time and walked out carrying the food box and medicine box. Lin Xian couldn't stop it even if he wanted to, so he could only watch her go back. Snowball had just finished eating the corn and ran out after him. The door is closed from the outside. Lin Xian sat on the bed, looking at the closed door, frowning. After Shen Shuwei came out, he put all the medicine boxes and food boxes into the space, and then walked towards Wang Jingyuan's room. Whether she and Qin Xiao can be released safely tomorrow depends on Wang Jingyuan. There were many guards patrolling at night. Shen Shuwei is petite and agile, making it easier to avoid patrols. There will definitely be many guards and maids keeping vigil at the main entrance. You will definitely not be able to get in through the main entrance, you will have to climb through the window. She had gone into Wang Jingyuan's room more than a dozen times, and the location of the furnishings inside was relatively clear. Climbing through a window is the best way. When Shen Shuwei came outside Wang Jingyuan's house, he found a guard standing guard beside the pillars. If you want to see Wang Jingyuan, you can only climb through the window. First, you have to lure the guards away. Shen Shuwei looked away, patted Xue Tuan's forehead, and raised his troops for 1,000 days to use them for a while. Xue Tuan, come on. Miao Xue Tuan rushed out bravely, threw himself into the guard's arms without any hesitation, opened his mouth and bit the pendant, turned around and ran away. I don't know what important thing Suichuan had bitten. When the guard saw it, he chased after him, cursing. Shen Shuwei saw the guard running away, so he ran out of the grass, climbed up the window neatly and went in. The house was quiet, probably because a patient lived there, and a light was left in the house. Shen Shuwei lit a lamp and came to the bedside, looking at Wang Jingyuan. The light was too dark at night, so he couldn't see his expression. She put the lamp on the table, sat down on the bed, and took Wang Jingyuan's hand to feel his pulse. After feeling the pulse, Shen Chu frowned slightly. It was clear that someone had poisoned Wang Jingyuan. The poison was administered very cleverly, and ordinary doctors could not detect it. Who poisoned Wang Jingyuan? Shen Shuwei took out a disposable cup from the space and took a glass of spiritual spring water. I was a bit ungrateful when giving him water. I couldn't help it. It's really hard to give water to a comatose person. A cup of spiritual spring water, feed half, and sprinkle half. After feeding him water, Shen Shuwei took out the needle bag, took out the silver needle and started acupuncture on Wang Jingyuan. Wang Jingyuan, who was originally unconscious, suddenly woke up. He slowly opened his eyes and dimly saw a person sitting on the bed. Su was too weak. He wanted to see clearly who the other party was, but he couldn't. He could only see a vague figure, stabbing something into his body, and the slight pain made him frown. Shen Shuwei calculated the time and retracted the silver needles one by one, looking at Wang Jingyuan on the bed. As long as he woke up tomorrow, she would be able to clear her suspicions. After cleaning up, Shen Shuwei climbed out of the window and jumped out. Back in the solitary room, Shen Shuwei still climbed through the window. She groped on the window for a while and found an iron nail, which hurt her lower back. She took out her dagger and took out the iron nails and threw them away. Qin Xiao heard the noise, raised his head and saw Shen Shuwei climbing in from the window. He had been worried, but he breathed a sigh of relief when he saw Shen Shuwei. Shen Shuwei climbed up the window, took the corn out of the space, put it into a cloth pocket and carried it on her back. When she saw Qin Xiao, she took off the cloth pocket and handed the corn to him. I brought you corn. You eat it first. After that, we will restore the bars to their original state. Qin Xiao was also hungry now. When he heard that there was corn to eat, he was not polite. He opened his cloth bag, took out a piece of corn and gnawed it. It was very fragrant. Late at night, everything is silent. Lin Xian lay on the bed, tossing and turning, unable to sleep. All he could think about was Shen Shui's burned hands and injured lower back. Later, the white and jade-like skin appeared again. He opened his eyes suddenly. I don't know if she returned to the solitary room safely. If the patriarch once thought that Dr. Shen harmed Wang Jingyuan, Dr. Shen would be in a very dangerous situation. Lin Xian stayed up all night worried. During breakfast, Lin Xian asked his maid to call Wang Leiwen over. The book title in the previous chapter was wrong. The correct title is After I Traveled into the Book, I Raised the Violent Regent as a Pampered Person. Good night. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 505. Lin Xian had never taken the initiative to look for Wang Leiwen. When she heard that Lin Xian was looking for her, she dressed up happily before going to the guest room. Lin Xian was having breakfast, but he was worried about Shen Shui, who would not be able to eat any more after taking 2 bites of breakfast. There were footsteps outside the door, and he guessed it was Wang Leiwen. The difference between her and Shen Shui's steps was that Shen Shui's steps were as brisk as hers, and they were very easy to get along with. Wang Leiwen's steps were quick but slow, and when she entered the door with a certain intensity, she was also deliberately gentle. Just like her, she had a bad temper but insisted on pretending to be gentle. Wang Leiwen walked in, saw Lin Xian, and sat down in front of him, with unconcealable joy in his eyes. Lin Xian, I heard that my maid said you were looking for me. Is there anything wrong? Lin Xiandao, I have something I want to ask you to help me with. Wang Leiwen said cheerfully, what's the matter? I will definitely help you, tell me. Lin Xian was too worried about Shen Shui, so he didn't beat around the bush and said straight to the point, I want to see Dr. Shen. Wang Leiwen's expression changed when he heard this. Why do you want to see Dr. Shen? He is a liar. My third brother was almost killed by him. Lin Xian noticed that Wang Leiwen's tone had changed. He softened his tone and said, I don't think Dr. Shen is that kind of person. You can ask Dr. Shen to check on your third brother's condition again. Maybe there will be improvement. Wang Leiwen didn't like Dr. Shen at all. Seeing Lin Xian speak for him, he was inevitably a little unhappy, but he pretended to be very good on the surface. Lin Xian, you are not familiar with Dr. Shen, why do you want to speak for him? Lin Xian said calmly, as the saying goes, a person becomes familiar again. If we live in the same guest room, we can be considered familiar after we have spoken a few words. Besides, I asked her to look at my eyes. Wang Leiwen's expression changed when he heard this. You actually asked him to look at your eyes? He is a charlatan. He is young and has many tricks to deceive people. Aren't you afraid that he will harm you? I have no enmity with her, how could she harm me? Lin Xian paused for a moment when he said this. After calming down the displeasure in his heart, he said quietly, I can see a little more with my eyes. Lin Xian never wanted others to know about his recovery of eyesight, but for Shen Shui's sake, he still made an exception and tried. Wang Leiwen has been looking forward to Lin Xian regaining his eyesight and being able to see her. Now that he can see her, of course he will be very happy. Really? Can you see me? Dr. Shen just needs to change the medicine twice. If I don't change the medicine and continue the treatment, my eyes may. Lin Xian didn't say any more, the meaning of his words was self-evident. Wang Leiwen was not a fool, and he could naturally understand the meaning behind Lin Xian's words. Lin Xian was worried that Dr. Shen would be kicked out of the imperial city after being punished, and no one would continue to treat his eyes. Don't worry, I will help you. It just so happened that she could ask Dr. Shen that if she wanted to save her, she would have to exchange the snowball. For the sake of her own life, she would definitely compromise. By the way, I helped Lin Xian and asked him to remember his kindness, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. At this time, inside the confinement room, Shen Shuwei was busy until late last night. There was no bed in the confinement room and she could only sleep against the wall. The tightly closed door was opened from the outside, making a metallic collision sound. Qin Xiao was awake all the time. When he saw someone walking in, he pushed Shen Shuwei and said, "Master, Master, someone has come in." Shen Shuwei woke up from her sleep, rubbed her eyes, and saw that the person coming was a tall man. The man was wearing black clothes and a blue turban on his head. There were 3 small braids hanging down on the right side. She recognized it at a glance as the clan leader's second son, Wang Jingxian. Wang Jingxian looked down at Dr. Shen condescendingly, not taking him seriously at all. "Dr. Shen, please come with me." Shen Shuwei helped Qin Xiao stand up. She was too busy last night and didn't have time to take a shower. She felt uncomfortable all over. Although she was lazy, it didn't mean she didn't like to be clean. She dusted herself off and then raised her head to look at Wang Jingxian. "Where are you going?" Wang Jingxuan's lips curved into a sneer. "A vicious charlatan like you will naturally be paraded on the streets so that the entire Xinmiao people can see what a liar you are, so as not to be deceived again." Qin Xiao's expression changed immediately when he heard that he was being paraded through the streets. How dare he let the crown princess of Daxia be paraded through the streets? He stepped forward and protected Shen Shuwei behind him, and said without any politeness, "My young master has superb medical skills and can detoxify hundreds of poisons." He woke up the 3rd master from a coma and his spirit improved. "These are all proof that my young master's medical skills are excellent." Seeing that they didn't give up, Wang Jingxian added, "The doctor diagnosed that the improvement was due to the use of strong medicine, and the sudden fainting was also caused by the backlash of the strong medicine. If the medical skills were good, my 3rd brother would not have fainted now not awake." Shen Shuwei walked out from behind Qin Xiao, raised her head and looked at Wang Jingxian. "The 3rd master will wake up today." Shen Shuwei, who had just woken up, had a hoarse voice with a sense of weakness. Wang Jingxian seemed to have heard some kind of joke. "The doctor already made a diagnosis yesterday. The 3rd brother is in a coma and is even more serious than before." Shen Chu looked Wang Jingxian up and down slightly. Although they were brothers, they were not similar to Wang Jingyuan. He was not as comfortable to look at as Wang Jingyuan. "I think you don't need to worry about Wang Jingxian now, but you should worry about your own body." Wang Jingxuan's expression changed again when he heard this, and he couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong with my body?" Shen Shuwei looked at Wang Jingyuan's face and said calmly, "Second master's complexion is yellowish and his eyes are blue. It means there is a liver problem. If not treated in time, it will be very dangerous." Wang Jingxian opened his eyes wide, as if he didn't believe that there was something wrong with his body. He pretended to be calm and said angrily, "You are a charlatan, do you think I will believe your nonsense?" Shen Shuwei shrugged indifferently, "It's your business whether to believe it or not, and it's my business whether to save it or not." Wang Jingxian pursed his lips and looked calm on the surface, but he was very afraid that there was something wrong with his body. If he took the initiative to let Dr. Shen treat him, he was afraid that everything he did would fail. Just when Wang Jingxian was hesitating, Wang Jingyu strode in. "Dr. Shen, Dr. Shen." When Wang Jingyu came in and saw Wang Jingxian, he frowned, "Why are you here?" Wang Jingxian explained, "Brother, my father asked me to take them to the streets to parade them as a warning to others. My 3rd brother has woken up and wants to see Dr. Shen." After Wang Jingyu finished speaking, he took 2 steps forward and came to Dr. Shen, his eyes full of joy. "Dr. Shen, my 3rd brother has woken up, please go and see him." Shen Shuwei was secretly relieved when she saw Wang Jingyuan wake up as expected. Okay, Shen Shuwei lowered her head and smelled it. After a night, the sweat smell was very strong, and she almost hated it herself. But I want to take a shower first. I'm covered in sweat and it smells so bad. Wang Jingyu smiled, that's no problem. Shen Shuwei followed Wang Jingyu out of the confinement room. Qin Xiao followed closely behind. It was stuffy in the confinement room. After coming out, the air was much better, but it was hot and dry. Shen Shuwei raised her hand to block the sun above her head. On such a hot day, she should stay in the house, with a maid fanning her, ice cubes cooling her down, and eating chilled watermelon and grapes. She believed that such a life would soon come true. As long as Xiao Jinyan's leg was cured, she would coax him to go home. Wang Jingxian watched Wang Jingyu leave with Dr. Shen, and his face turned blue with anger. Yesterday the doctor clearly said that the condition had worsened, how did he suddenly wake up? After leaving the guest room, Wang Leiwen rushed all the way to the confinement room. She wanted to see how embarrassed Dr. Shen was, and even more wanted to see how he begged her. When she walked into the confinement room, she only saw Wang Jingxian standing inside, but she didn't see Dr. Shen. Wang Leiwen thought she was a step late, and looked at Wang Jingxian with some indignation. Second brother, where is Dr. Shen? He won't be paraded out in the streets, right? Can't he wait for me? She promised Lin Xian to take Dr. Shen there, and she couldn't let him down. Wang Jingxian was about to leave, but he stopped when he saw Wang Leiwen coming. He didn't go to the streets to be paraded, but was taken away by the eldest brother. It seems that your third brother has woken up. Wang Leiwen said with doubts, the third brother has woken up, and it wasn't Dr. Shen who saved him. Why did you take him away? I know that too. Wang Jingxian sighed helplessly, Dr. Shen is too good at lying. If the eldest brother believes him, Awan will get into trouble, and it will be too late to regret it. Wang Leiwen couldn't help but start to worry when he heard it. The eldest brother is also confused. That Dr. Shen just wanted to save the third brother for the 10,000 gold. So many doctors are useless. What good medical skills does he have as a young man? After Wang Leiwen finished speaking, he thought of Lin Xian's eyes. Lin Xian said that Dr. Shen could cure his eyes. Could it be that he had some medical skills? Even so, Wang Leiwen was still a little unhappy that his wish failed. In the guest room, Shen Shuwei sat in the bathtub and soaked in warm water, feeling comfortable all over. This is the second bucket of hot water. She didn't take a bath last night, and she felt that a bucket of water was not enough to wash clean. Qin Xiao was guarding outside the door while Shen Shuwei was taking a bath. After Shen Shuwei took a bath and changed her clothes, she went to Wang Jingyuan's room. The room was crowded with people. The clan leader, Wang Jingyu, and several other doctors were all inside. When Shen Shuwei stepped in, she felt that the air inside was thin, and the room was a few degrees hotter than the corridor. Clan leader, the third master, was able to wake up because the previous medicine was too strong. The subordinates checked the prescriptions used by Dr. Shen one by one. There were several herbs that the subordinates studied and found that the herbs were strong. The third master was very weak and not suitable for use on the third master. The purpose of Dr. Shen doing this was to get the 10,000 gold. As soon as Shen Shuwei came in, she heard a doctor diss her. She walked 2 steps inside and saw the doctor who dissed her. He was an old man in his 50s. He looked like he was talking in a very reasonable way. She almost believed it. The clan leader was extremely anxious after hearing this, and paced back and forth in the room. What can you do? The doctor pondered for a moment and said, Clan leader, you can try lynxia grass as a medicine. Shen Shuwei's mouth twitched violently. Lynxia grass is very strong and effective, but it is also a death warrant. This is not a cure, it is clearly a death warrant. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 506. This is Ancient Times, and I don't know if the doctor has a qualification certificate. Black people are called white, and white people are called black. My treatment costs money, your treatment costs lives. As soon as he finished speaking, everyone looked over with doubts. Shen Shuwei walked in slowly in the eyes of everyone, with a lazy posture, as if he had just woken up. When the doctor saw Dr. Shen, he became very angry. Just because of Dr. Shen's arrival, they were scolded by the patriarch. He, a 50-year-old doctor, is worse than a dumb man with no hair on his head. Green. What do you mean? Shen Shuwei repeated, I said your treatment is fatal. The doctor's face turned blue with anger. When he saw the third master on the bed, he snorted, for the reward of 10,000 yuan, you gave the third master strong medicine, which made him weak. Do you really think you are very capable? I have been practicing medicine for 30 years. Zay, be careful when treating third master. It's not like you using strong medicine to kill third master for your own selfish reasons. Shen Chu said faintly, as a doctor, you don't even know the medicinal materials, so you have the nerve to say that you have been practicing medicine for 30 years. If I had used strong medicine, the third master would have been alive and well in the first 3 days instead of 10 days. I am for the bounty, I wouldn't accept it if it wasn't for the 10,000 bounty, so I need money for medical treatment. What a loud tone. The doctor touched his gray beard. Are you 15 years old? At your age, you probably don't even know all the medicinal ingredients, right? For the 10,000 bounty, I really dare to use any medicine. Shen Shuwei looked at it and wasted no time in arguing about her age. She asked, then what do you think the effect of Lingxiu Cao is? Why do you want to use Lingxiu Cao for the third master? The doctor's eyes paused when he heard this, and he coughed lightly. Lingxiu is a very tonic herb. It can replenish qi and nourish the body. More importantly, Lingxiu is said to bring back the soul. The third master is weak, so he can use this medicine. The talk of resurrecting the soul is nonsense. It is true that Lingxi grass replenishes qi and nourishes vitality, but Lingxi grass also has the function of replenishing yang energy, which is 10 times as effective as deer blood. Generally, people cannot withstand such strong medicine, let alone what's more, if you give this medicine to third master, it's like a life-saving talisman. Isn't it unfair to you? Shen Shuwei spoke slowly and showed a faint smile of unknown meaning to the doctor. After Shen Shuwei finished speaking, the room suddenly became quiet. The doctor's face turned green and white. He didn't expect that a young boy could know so much that he couldn't get off the stage. After hearing what Dr. Shen said, the patriarch asked coldly, Doctor, what is going on? The doctor was feeling guilty when he was questioned by the patriarch. He was so frightened that he broke into a cold sweat. Chief, don't be deceived by a young boy. I have been practicing medicine for 30 years, how could I not even know the efficacy of Lingxi grass? He was just doing it for the bounty is a random fabrication to murder the third master. The patriarch began to feel a little shaken when he heard this. The doctor had been working in the imperial city for 10 years. Looking at Dr. Shen, a young boy, it is indeed difficult to convince people. Dr. Shen, do you have anything else to say? The doctor lowered his eyebrows and nodded, feeling happy in his heart. The clan leader still believed in him. In this way, Dr. Shen would not only be punished but also be kicked out, and his goal would be achieved. Shen Chu smiled slightly and replied calmly, in that case, please ask this elderly doctor to give me a piece of Lingxi grass. If nothing happens, I will apologize and get out of the imperial city. The doctor just raised the corner of his mouth. When he heard this sentence, his smile immediately disappeared. He said angrily, I'm not sick, why should I eat lingsha grass? Shen Chu said lightly, you said lingsha grass is a mild medicinal material. At your age, it's okay to replenish your vitality and yang energy, unless you don't dare. The doctor stiffened his neck and pretended to be calm and replied, who says I don't dare? Lingsha grass is a very precious medicinal material, and there is one in the imperial city. If I use it, the third master will be out of medicine. Lingsha grass is precious. Unfortunately, I have one here, so you don't have to worry about the third master. Shen Shuwei took out a small wooden box from her arms, looked at the doctor with a smile, and opened it slowly. Take out the box and show him the lingsha grass inside. When the doctor saw the lingshuko in his hand, he immediately panicked. He was very aware of the medicinal effects of lingshuko. If he ate the whole plant, he would probably vomit blood immediately. When Shen Shuwei saw him standing there motionless, she asked with a puzzled look on her face, are you worried that lingsha grass will cost money? The doctor opened his eyes wide. Lingsha grass is a very precious medicinal material. If you buy it with money, you will be able to refuse it. That's natural. Lingsuanko is hard to find. Shen Chu smiled slightly, don't worry, Lingsuko doesn't charge money. The doctor only felt that this smile was like a murderous knife, killing without blood. The patriarch was a little excited when he saw lingsha grass. He turned to look at the doctor, what are you still waiting for? Since you said the medicine is mild, let's try it. The doctor couldn't shirk it, and it was difficult to try. Finally, his legs gave out and he knelt on the ground with a plop, kowtowing, Chief, my subordinates are confused and have misunderstood the properties of the medicine. When the doctor knelt down, everyone realized that the doctor was lying, and what Dr. Shen said was right. The clan leader angrily kicked the doctor and knocked him to the ground, vomiting blood. Eating food inside and outside cannot cure my son's disease, and he also wants to harm my son. The patriarch shouted angrily, come here, put him in a dungeon and feed him to snakes. Patriarch, please have mercy on me, clan leader, please have mercy on me. Ignoring the doctor's desperate pleas for mercy, the guards swallowed him up expressionlessly. The room fell silent again. When the clan leader looked at Dr. Shen, he trusted him more than before. Dr. Shen, I wronged you before. As long as you cure my son's illness, the reward will be doubled. Shen Shuwei was very happy that he could earn 20,000 gold while looking for someone. Thank you, clan leader. When everyone in the room left, Shen Shuwei came to the bed and sat down, took his hand and began to feel his pulse. Wang Jingyuan had been awake all the time. He saw what happened just now, but he didn't expect that she could solve it so easily. Looking at the eyebrows and eyes similar to Xiaju, he seemed to see Xiaju when he grew up. After taking the pulse, Shen Shuwei found that Wang Jingyuan had been staring at him. What's wrong? Wang Jingyuan shook his head, nothing, did you come last night? Shen Shuwei chuckled, well, I came secretly last night, and found out that you were poisoned after taking your pulse. I detoxified you and gave you acupuncture. Otherwise, I would have to parade you through the streets today. No wonder I felt much better this morning. Wang Jingyuan found an important problem after he finished speaking. You sneaked out. Were you locked up? Did they want you to be paraded through the streets? Well, you suddenly fainted, and they thought it was me, so they locked me up in the confinement room. I sneaked out last night to take your pulse. Shen Shuwei laughed when she said this. Shouldn't you worry about why you were poisoned? Who poisoned you? Wang Jingyuan said indifferently, I'm fine now, right? It's you who got implicated and was put in solitary confinement. Shen Shuwei hesitated for a long time before asking, since you said so, can you do me a favor? Wang Jingyuan agreed very readily, you said, I will definitely help. Shen Shuwei said, didn't I tell you last time that the wound has not healed? You said it might be poisoned. A friend of mine is in this situation. How about you help me get rid of the poison? Wang Jingyuan agreed almost without thinking. Okay, when can you ask your friend to come over? I will immediately get rid of the poison for him. Shen Shuwei was a little excited. Tonight, I'll bring him over tonight. Wang Jingyuan raised the corner of his lips. Okay, I'll wait for you tonight. Shen Shuwei happily went to find Xiao Jinyan. At this time, Lin Xian was holding Sichuan, and he couldn't help but start to get anxious after waiting for a long time for Shen Shuwei to come. Why haven't you come back yet? Lin Xian couldn't wait, and pushed the wheelchair to the yard, looking at the door. Sichuan raised his head and looked at the door. One person and one cat, just like the husband waiting stone. Shen Shuwei came back with a cheerful step, and saw Xiao Jinyan and Sichuan in the yard from a distance. She happily pushed open the gate and walked in. Husband. Lin Xian was relieved when he saw Shen Shuwei coming back. He looked her up and down and found that the clothes she was wearing were different from last night. It was obvious that she had changed her clothes after taking a bath. It's good to come out. Shen Shuwei squatted down in front of him, rubbed Sichuan's forehead, and asked with a smile, Husband, you came out to wait for me on purpose. Are you worried about me? Lin Xian saw her smiling face. He paused, denied, No, the room is too stuffy, come out to get some fresh air. Oh, I thought my husband was waiting for me here on purpose. Shen Shuwei was a little disappointed. She smiled and said, Husband, Wang Jingyuan and I agreed to detoxify you tonight. Lin Xian frowned and said unhappily, Did you tell him? Shen Shuwei nodded. You can't delay the wound on your chest any longer, you must detoxify immediately, and then let the wound heal quickly, otherwise it will be very dangerous. Lin Xian's voice was very deep. Do you trust him so much? Shen Shuwei said, I don't trust him very much, but I think he can be trusted. Lin Xian. Don't worry, I will take care of it if something happens, and I won't drag my husband down. Shen Shuwei was sincere, and she almost raised her hand to swear. Lin Xian ignored her, turned the wheelchair and walked inside. Husband, I'll help you. Shen Shuwei stood up, held the handrail, and pushed the wheelchair in. After entering, Shen Shuwei picked up the teapot and poured a cup of tea, and drank several gulps. She was so thirsty. After drinking, she was about to pour another cup and found that he was looking at her. She blinked her beautiful big eyes twice and immediately realized what was going on. Then she poured another cup and handed it to him with both hands. Husband, drink tea. Lin Xian glanced at the teacup in her hand. It was the one she had just drunk. He looked away and ignored it. Shen Shuwei didn't know what he meant, so she asked, Husband, aren't you thirsty? Lin Xian opened his thin lips slightly, No. Oh, Shen Shuwei took it back and handed it to her lips. She drank it in a few gulps. After drinking 2 cups, she finally quenched her thirst. Lin Xian. I originally planned to write some plots about Su Qingqing and Jun Wuxian, but this chapter is full of 3,000 words. Good night, babies. Please support me by voting for monthly tickets and recommendation tickets to climb the list. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 507. Shen Shuwei put down the teacup in his hand to look at Xiao Jinyan, and saw that he had a cold face, which was very different from his usual coldness. The two had been married for some time, and they had always been getting along harmoniously and happily. She poured herself another cup of tea, put it to her mouth and took a few sips. Suddenly she thought of the injury on her lower back. She put down the teacup in her hand and tugged on Xiao Jinyan's sleeve. Husband, can you change my dressing? Lin Xian raised his head and met a pair of shining star eyes. Every time he saw these eyes, he always felt like she was being coquettish to him. He doesn't like women who act coquettishly, and he doesn't like women who act coquettishly towards him, which will make him feel disgusted. It's just that Shen Shui's coquettish look is a little different from other women. She's natural and not artificial, and her voice is sweet but not greasy. But he didn't forget that he and her were not husband and wife, and he had no choice but to do it last night. If men and women don't have sex, ask your maid to change your medicine. Shen Chu curled his lips slightly. The maids here are not my personal maids. If they tell anyone, wouldn't I be exposed? If Chengzi is here, I won't trouble my husband. Lin Xian. Shen Shui held her chin with her hands and said aggrievedly, my husband is unwilling to change my dressing. Does he dislike me? Lin Xian, I don't know whether my husband dislikes you or not. I only know that men and women are not close to each other, so it is better to avoid suspicion. Shen Shui stared at him for a long time. The indifferent expression made her a little hurt. She didn't sleep well last night. She felt tired and sleepy now. If she hadn't gone to see Wang Jingyuan, she would have wanted to lie down after taking a bath. Take a nap on the couch. Then I'll change it myself. The medical kit was brought when she arrived. Shen Shui opened the medical kit, took out the medicine and gauze, and saw that the door was open. She got up and closed the door. When she came back, she began to take off her clothes. Lin Xian looked at her actions without any intention of avoiding suspicion. He took off his clothes without any hesitation. After taking off the outer robe, he turned into the inner garment. When he opened his clothes, revealing a hint of pink belly band, his breath was stagnant, and his cheeks suddenly became extremely hot. He quickly turned his head and looked away. Shen Shui put her middle coat on the stool and found that Xiao Jinyan's back was turned to her, looking like a gentleman. She couldn't help but joke, I didn't see it, but you are quite a gentleman. Lin Xian heard the ridicule in her words, and he said calmly, I am not a gentleman, but... Shen Shui asked, but what? Lin Xian said one sentence at a time, you treated me, which is considered a favor to me. How can I ruin your good reputation? Shen Shui untied the gauze and listened to his words of a gentleman. Thinking of the man's behavior last night, she burst into laughter. But you saw it last night. Not only did you see it, you also touched it? Does that count as ruining someone's reputation? Lin Xian's cheeks were slightly red and he retorted, I was dressing your wounds, it was inevitable. Shen Chu said softly, yes, you were bandaged last night, but today you have to pretend to be a gentleman. Don't you think it's hypocritical? Lin Xian was speechless for a moment. Seeing that he remained silent, Shen Shui suppressed a laugh, lowered his head and began to apply medicine to himself. The injury was invisible on his lower back, and the medicine was in powder form, so it was more troublesome to apply medicine. The powder was sprinkled all over the floor, but not much was sprinkled on the wound. The room was quiet for a while. When she heard Shen Shui's words, Lin Xian was a little worried, thinking that she was injured on her lower back and it would be troublesome for him not to be able to apply the medicine. He struggled internally for a long time and asked, is the medicine ready? Not yet. Shen Shui was sweating profusely. He didn't know if the medicine was spilled on the wound. He knew he should lie on the bed and apply the medicine. Lin Xian heard something was wrong in her voice. He turned around and looked over in a hurry. He had seen how white her skin was last night. But when he saw it now, he found that her skin was not only white and tender, but also had a touch of pink in her white skin. The flawless back looked extremely frightening with wounds. A lot of medicinal powder was sprinkled on the ground, indicating that all the medicine just applied was sprinkled on the ground. She was seen pouring medicine on the wound with difficulty, and the movement of bending down caused her delicate little face to become crimson. After all, he couldn't stand it anymore, so he pushed the wheelchair over and said, I'll help you. Shen Shui was feeling very uncomfortable, but when he saw that he was willing to help, she didn't show any pretense. Okay. After saying that, she handed him the medicine in her hand, and then she leaned on the table obediently so that he could take the medicine. Lin Xian took the medicine and looked at the wound that was as long as a finger. Since he was not a gentleman, why should he be a gentleman? After thinking about it, he held the medicine bottle in his hand tightly and sprinkled the medicine powder evenly on the wound. Shen Shuwei lay on the table and suddenly said, "Husband, I want to go home." Lin Xian stopped moving his hands and raised his eyes to look at Shen Shuwei, only to see that her eyes were closed tightly, as if she was about to fall asleep. "Where is your home?" "My home." Shen Shuwei thought that she would never be able to go back to modern times in her life. Even if she could go back, she would not be able to leave Xiao Jinyan and her babies. In Daxia, Daxia has a lot of tea snacks, which are very delicious. Thinking of tea fruit, Shen Shuwei became greedy again. Unfortunately, there is no tea fruit seller here, and it is too troublesome to make it. Lin Xian had heard that Daxia was very far from here. No matter how far it was, it would take about 10 days to ride a fast horse. "Since you miss home, go back early." Lin Xian put down the medicine bottle, picked up the gauze and bandaged the wound carefully. Shen Chu opened his eyes slightly and turned to look at him, his eyes full of anticipation. "When your legs are healed, can you go back with me?" "Not good." Lin Xian refused coldly, and did not stop bandaging his hands. Shen Shuwei asked doubtfully, "Why?" "First, I'm not your husband. Second, I have my own things to do. Third," Lin Xian raised his head and looked at Shen Shuwei with a smile, "what would happen if your husband knew that I saw your body?" Shen Shuwei said, "I said you are my husband, but you don't believe me. How could I let a man other than my husband see my body?" Lin Xian said, "But I'm not." Shen Shuwei was a little helpless. "Let's talk about these later, I will always remember them. What do you want to do?" "I'll accompany you." Lin Xian's eyes paused when he heard this. "No need." He lowered his head and continued to bandage the wound. After the bandage was done, "Put on your clothes." Shen Shuwei sat up straight, picked up the middle coat and put it on slowly. Lin Xian looked down at the snowball in his arms. The snowball rubbed his hand with its fluffy head. It was a beautiful and smart cat. No wonder Shen Shuwei liked it so much and took it with her wherever she went. At this time, the door was suddenly pushed open from the outside. Wang Leiwen outside the door was stunned when he saw the two people in the room. He looked at Dr. Shen and saw that he was putting on his coat. A hint of suspicion flashed in his eyes. Shen Shuwei was about to put on her coat when she was interrupted by the sudden sound of the door opening. She saw that the person coming was Wang Leiwen. After a short moment of daze, she calmly put the changed gauze into the space with her mind and began to put on her clothes slowly. Lin Xian subconsciously raised his head and looked at the door. Seeing the woman in red clothes at the door, he knew without asking that she was Wang Leiwen. This was the first time he saw Wang Leiwen after he regained his eyesight. It is said that appearance is determined by the heart. This sentence still makes some sense. Being caught on the spot, he immediately calmed down. "Princess Leun." Wang Leun frowned. "What are you doing?" She looked at Dr. Shen again, watching her tie her belt, and asked curiously, "Why are you here? Why are you taking off your clothes?" "I stayed in the confinement room all day last night and my waist was uncomfortable, so he applied some ointment on me," Shen Shuwei said, looking up and down at Wang Leun. "But you, a girl entering a man's room, don't you know to knock on the door? What if the person inside is taking off clothes or taking a bath? Wouldn't you see it naked?" Wang Leun's face changed, and she looked at Lin Xian, only to see him looking at her indifferently. She immediately retorted, "I was worried about Mr. Lin, so I broke in without knocking. I wouldn't be like this before." Shen Shuwei stood up and tied her waist belt and looked at Wang Leun, and then glanced at Xiao Jinyan. "Princess Leun is shouting, and those who don't know would think you are here to do something." Lin Xian found that the usually well-behaved and cute Shen Shuwei was a bit eloquent at this time. He looked at Wang Leiwen. Is Princess Leiwen here for something? When Wang Leiwen looked at Lin Xian, she found that the gauze on his eyes had been removed. She happily stepped forward a few steps and looked at the narrow and long phoenix eyes. Mr. Lin, can you see? Lin Xian nodded. Well, thank you Princess Leiwen for taking care of you during this period of time. Wang Leiwen blushed when he learned that he could see. Mr. Lin, you are too polite, it's good to be able to see. Lin Xian glanced at Shen Shuwei and said, I also want to thank you for letting Dr. Shen come to see me. You're welcome, it's all. Before Wang Leiwen finished speaking, Shen Shuwei asked in confusion, what does my visit to you have to do with Princess Leiwen? Lin Xian asked, didn't Leiwen rescue you from the closed room? Shen Shuwei said, of course not, it was because the third master woke up, and I proved that I didn't harm the third master, that I was safe and sound. Wang Leiwen glared at Dr. Shen in dissatisfaction. If you don't speak, will anyone think you are dumb? When she looked at Lin Xian, her eyes softened. He had already come out when I went there. Lin Xian said, thank you. A hint of shyness flashed across Wang Leiwen's eyes. Shen Shuwei looked at the two people in front of him with dissatisfaction, always feeling that Wang Leiwen had bad intentions towards Xiao Jinyan. At night, Shen Shuwei excitedly pushed the wheelchair out. Lin Xian frowned. It should be a happy thing to remove the poison and let the wound heal, but he was not very happy now. Wang Jingyuan was waiting in the room early. He was very curious about who Dr. Shen's friend was. At this time, the door was pushed open from the outside. Wang Jingyuan heard the movement and raised his head, and saw Shen Shuwei pushing someone in. When he saw the man in the wheelchair, a hint of doubt flashed across his eyes. Are you Xiao Jinyan? Lin Xian raised his head and looked at the person on the bed. He had heard about Wang Jingyuan from Wang Leiwen, but this was the first time they met, and he was the second person who thought he was Xiao Jinyan. Good evening, babies. Seeking monthly tickets and recommendation tickets for support. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 508. It had been several months since Wang Jingyuan fell ill. His mental state was not good, his face was excessively pale, and he had a morbid sense of disgust. Lin Xian's maid had said before that there were rumors that Wang Jingyuan was in a coma and would never wake up. Now he saw that Wang Jingyuan was fine after being treated by Shen Shuwei. Except for being a little sick, everything else was fine. Shen Shuwei looked at Wang Jingyuan in surprise, pointed at Xiao Jinyan and asked, do you know him? Wang Jingyuan stared at Lin Xian for a long time. He was very similar to Xiao Jinyan in his youth, especially those stunning phoenix eyes. He looks very similar to Xiao Jinyan. Maybe I made a mistake. How could he be here? Shen Shuwei didn't think so. She let go of the armrest of her wheelchair, came to Wang Jingyuan, and asked curiously, do you really know Xiao Jinyan? Wang Jingyuan had a slight smile on his lips. I met him several years ago, so I was a little surprised to see that he looks very similar to Xiao Jinyan. Shen Shuwei asked, where have you seen it? Nanzeokyo. After Wang Jingyuan said that, he stared at Shen Shuwei for a long time and couldn't help but start to look forward to it. What about you? Do you also know Xiao Jinyan? Lin Xian watched the two people in front of him whispering to each other as if no one was watching. His face darkened and his voice became colder. What are you talking about? Shen Shuwei was about to answer when he heard Xiao Jinyan's cold voice and subconsciously turned around to look at him, only to see that his face looked a little ugly. Just chatting. Lin Xian said coldly, is there anything I can't listen to? Shen Shuwei explained, of course not, just a few words. Wang Jingyuan noticed that he glanced at a man who looked exactly like Xiao Jinyan, and asked Shen Shuwei, is he the friend you mentioned who had an injured heart? Shen Shu nodded slightly, well, the wound on his heart hasn't healed for more than a month, so you should check to see if it's been poisoned. Wang Jingyuan looked at the man who looked exactly like Xiao Jinyan, and his eyes fell on his heart. Even though he was wearing clothes, he couldn't see the wound inside. "Let me take a look." Ye Shen Shuwei came behind the wheelchair and pushed it to the bedside. She knew Xiao Jinyan that even if a man saw him taking off his clothes, she had to follow his opinion. "I'm taking off your clothes." Lin Xian looked at the two people in front of him. He was not a temperamental person. Shen Shuwei persuaded Wang Jingyuan to cure him of the poison. He came here, so he couldn't be pretentious. "I will do it myself." Shen Shuwei was naturally happy that Xiao Jinyan could cooperate. "Good." Lin Xian's hands came to his waist, and he untied the belt of his clothes in front of the two of them, exposing his chest. "Let me help you." Shen Shuwei stepped forward and untied the gauze for him, layer by layer, revealing the wound on his heart. Even after using the best medicine, the wound still hadn't healed after so long. There was a blood hole in his heart, still bleeding, and the blood was bright red and shocking. The wound is very close to the heart. If the wound becomes larger and cannot heal, it will cause infection. If the heart becomes infected, Hua Tuo will not be able to save him again. This was also the reason why Shen Shuwei had been worried and wanted Wang Jingyuan to help. Wang Jingyuan saw the wound. It didn't look like it was injured by a sharp weapon for so long. He frowned and said, "It is indeed a poison." Shen Shuwei asked, "Can we get rid of the poison now?" Wang Jingyuan raised his head and looked at Shen Shuwei. Seeing her undisguised worried look, he nodded, "Yes, it will take some time." Shen Chu said slightly, "It doesn't matter, I can wait, as long as I can get rid of the poison." Shen Shuwei couldn't wait, so Wang Jingyuan certainly wouldn't let her down. "Well, I'll get rid of the poison now." Lin Xian didn't know much about Gu, and he didn't know that Wang Jingyuan was a Gu master. From his tone, he should be an expert in this field. The wound on the heart can be healed, so there is no need to endure the pain of bone erosion every day. Shen Shuwei didn't know how to solve the poison, but just by looking at Wang Jingyuan's every move and his smooth movements, he knew that solving the poison was a very troublesome matter. "It is only now that I know that the blood used to remove the poison is the blood of the poison master. This is why a poison master is needed to remove the poison. I heard that it has a deterrent effect." It took an hour to remove the poison. Shen Shuwei saw Wang Jingyuan holding a bamboo tube and placing it on Xiao Jinyan's heart. He didn't know what he was using, but he saw insects as big as black sesame seeds crawling out of the flesh and crawling into the bamboo tube at a slow speed. 1, 2, 3. There were 8 goo worms in total. Shen Shuwei had goosebumps when he looked at them. It was these 8 goo worms that ate Xiao Jinyan's flesh and blood day and night, causing the wound to be unable to heal. At this time, Lin Xian's face turned pale because of the pain. The poisonous insects crawled out of the flesh and blood, as if they had been poked by needles. Every time one crawled out, it had to endure such severe pain. He gritted his teeth and said nothing. Shen Shuwei saw cold sweat breaking out on Xiao Jinyan's painful forehead. She couldn't help but feel distressed. She took out her handkerchief and gently wiped the cold sweat on her forehead. "It'll be fine soon, just bear with it a little longer." The tone of voice was like coaxing a child, making Lin Xian dumbfounded. Wang Jingyuan put away the bamboo tube and said, "All the poisonous insects have crawled out." Shen Shuwei thanked her sincerely, "Thank you." Wang Jingyuan said, "You're welcome, it's my honor to be able to help you." Shen Shuwei took out the disinfectant and disinfected it, then sprinkled it with medicinal powder and bandaged it again. After handling it, Shen Shuwei let out a long breath. The hidden danger he had been worried about was temporarily relieved, and he could have a good sleep tonight. Wang Jingyuan grabbed Shen Shuwei's hand and closed the distance between them. He looked at her with expectant eyes. "Are you really from Daxia? Not Nanzao?" Shen Shuwei asked in confusion, "Why do you ask that?" Wang Jingyuan pointed at the man in the wheelchair who looked like Xiao Jinyan and asked, "Who is he?" "He is Xiao Jinyan, but here," Shen Shuwei glanced at Xiao Jinyan and pointed to her head to indicate, "he doesn't remember that he is Xiao Jinyan, and thinks he is Lin Xian." Lin Xian saw Shen Shuwei's action and his face darkened. He knew without asking that she was talking about him. She said so much to a man casually, and she was not afraid of being sold out. Wang Jingyuan knew that Feng Wuxian and Xiao Jinyan had a good relationship. He suddenly grabbed her hand and asked excitedly, "Since he is Xiao Jinyan, what about you? What is your real name? Is it Feng Wu?" Shen Shuwei was stunned at first, and then found a very important question, "Do you know I am a woman?" Wang Jingyuan touched his nose embarrassedly, "Well, you have pierced ears, and I found it when I was doing acupuncture for me." Shen Shuwei, just found it out like that. In fact, Shen Shuwei didn't think it was a big deal to be discovered that she was a woman, but it was so easy to find out. Does it mean that her disguise skills are too weak? Wang Jingyuan continued to ask, "Then are you Feng Wu?" Shen Shuwei shook her head, "No, my real name is Shen Shuwei, born in Daxia." Wang Jingyuan was a little bit unbelievable when he heard it, and then he felt lost, and a little willing. "But you and her are really a bit alike. I noticed it when I saw you for the first time. As for Feng Wu, she is indeed a bit similar to me, but I am not her." Shen Shuwei suddenly thought of something and looked at him curiously, "Who is Feng Wu?" Lin Xian recovered at this time and looked at the two people who had been chatting. He vaguely heard some of the chat content. His brows were furrowed and his face was very gloomy. "I'm tired." Shen Shuwei looked up and saw that his face was a little pale. After the poison was removed, his eyes were a little weak. She began to feel distressed again. She retracted her gaze and looked at Wang Jingyuan, "Thank you for helping me. I have another thing to ask you." Wang Jingyuan asked, "What is it?" "What happened tonight and what I said, keep it a secret for me, okay? I will definitely cure you and try to let you live longer." Shen Shuwei wanted to raise her hand and swear at the end to express her promise. "Lin Xian." Wang Jingyuan raised his hand and swore, his eyes sincere, "Don't worry, I won't tell anyone else." Shen Shuwei knew that he had good eyesight, and she curved her eyebrows, "I'll bring you delicious food tomorrow." After that, she pushed Xiao Jinyan out and closed the door before leaving. Wang Jingyuan looked at the closed door, and his heart suddenly felt empty. He was Xiao Jinyan, why wasn't she Feng Wu? They look very similar. After coming out, Lin Xian had a gloomy face and didn't say a word. Shen Shuwei was very happy. After the poison is removed, it should be completely healed within 4 days. You should be able to walk by then. Are you happy? Lin Xian listened to her cheerful tone, but did not smile because of her words, but his face became a little darker. Shen Shuwei found that he ignored her, and her delicate face was full of doubts. Did she say the wrong thing again? After returning to the guest room, Shen Shuwei pushed him to the bedside, looked down at his face, and found that his face was cold. She reached out and pinched his hand on the armrest. "Husband, what's wrong with you? Does your heart still hurt?" Lin Xian raised his head and saw her looking at him with a worried look. Thinking of the scene of her and Wang Jingyuan talking and laughing just now, his face suddenly darkened again. "What did you talk about with Wang Jingyuan?" They were not talking loudly, and he also heard half of it and missed half, so he was very curious. Shen Shuwei did not intend to hide it, and repeated the content of the conversation just now in a concise manner. "He knew you. When we were in Nanzhao Kingdom, he said that I looked like someone, and he probably recognized the wrong person. However, you must have known each other, but you just don't remember it?" Whether he knew Lin Xian or not didn't know, but his leg was healed and he was going to Nanzhao Kingdom. Only when he went there, he could solve some doubts. "Are you talking about Xiao Jinyan? Didn't you say it was Daxia?" What did you do in Nanzao before? You were a hostage in Nanzao for 8 years. You are now the crown prince of Daxia. I am the crown princess, your first wife. Who would have thought that she, who only wanted to eat and drink and didn't want to do anything, would climb up from the position of salary to the position of crown princess? Who would have thought that she didn't fight for anything but got all the favor of Xiao Jinyan, and Xiao Jinyan only had her as a woman. They also gained 2 smart and cute babies. She really missed the 2 babies after being away from the palace for so long. Lin Xian was shocked for a long time after hearing this. Good night. Please support with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 509. What shocked him was not only the identity of Xiao Jinyan she mentioned, but also the fact that she was the crown princess. Lin Xian looked at the woman in front of him. He thought she was very beautiful and comfortable to get along with when he saw her for the first time. He didn't expect that she would be the crown princess. She didn't have the airs of a crown princess at all. Although she was very delicate, she was not annoying. Shen Shuwei thought of what he said in the afternoon that he had something to do. As a person with amnesia, she was very curious about what he wanted to do. You said you wanted to do something today, so what do you plan to do after your leg is healed? Lin Xian came back from the shock. He glanced at Shen Shuwei, moved his wheelchair with his back to her, and said in a cold voice, "It has nothing to do with you." Shen Shuwei came to him, grabbed the armrests of the wheelchair with both hands, and said angrily, "How can it have nothing to do with me? Are you thinking that you will abandon me after your leg is healed?" Lin Xian looked at the woman in front of him who was about to cry with grievance, so he couldn't say anything harsh. But he couldn't be soft-hearted. The consequences of being soft-hearted were more serious. Get out of here. Shen Shuwei felt that Xiao Jinyan should be thankful for his good temper, otherwise, if someone with a bad temper came, she would really want to hit him with a hammer. He actually let his wife go. I still need to give you acupuncture. Are you sure you want me to leave? Lin Xian was stunned when he heard this. He lowered his eyes and looked at his legs. No matter how angry he was, he couldn't go against his legs. As long as his legs were better, he could go wherever he wanted, so he wouldn't have to spend every day with her. It was just because of his face that Lin Xian couldn't say the words to let her stay and give him acupuncture. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Shen Shuwei shook her head helplessly and turned to get the medicine box. Lin Xian hurriedly turned back to glance at Shen Shuwei. Seeing that she was taking the medicine box instead of leaving, he retracted his gaze, helped himself up with the wheelchair, and slowly moved to the bed. When Shen Shuwei came back with the medicine box, he saw him sitting on the bed, with his trouser legs rolled up to his knees, revealing his knees wrapped in gauze. He looked so well behaved. The premise is to ignore his arrogant face. This is probably the case of a dead duck pretending to be good after being stubborn. Even if Xiao Jinyan chased her away, she would not leave. His legs had been delayed for a long time and could not be delayed any longer. Shen Shuwei did not squeeze him. After putting down the medicine box, he opened it, took out the medicine and tools to be used, untied the gauze, and began to give him acupuncture with ease. The acupuncture process was long and boring. Lin Xian's eyes were originally looking elsewhere, but he unconsciously moved his eyes to the person in front of him. Whenever she gave him acupuncture, her expression was serious and quiet. The scene in front of him suddenly overlapped with a scene deep in his memory. "Brother Jinyan, it won't hurt after applying the ointment." The little girl's soft and sweet voice and the overlapping pictures emerged in his mind. Waves of headaches came, as if there were 2 hands tearing desperately, and his head felt uncomfortable as if it was about to explode. Lin Xian only felt a splitting headache, as if something would jump out of his head in the next second. Shen Shuwei didn't notice anything unusual about Xiao Jinyan. She said as she bandaged him, "We'll try to see how he recovers in 2 days. If there's still tingling, we'll have to treat him for another half a month. If there's no tingling, he'll be able to move freely within half a month." After Shen Shuwei finished bandaging, she looked up at Xiao Jinyan and found that his face was pale, his forehead was covered with cold sweat, and his handsome face was a little distorted because of the pain. "What's wrong with you? Are you feeling uncomfortable somewhere?" She stood up in a hurry and grabbed his wrist to check his pulse, but he held her wrist in reverse. During the pull, they both fell on the bed. She didn't know where her mouth touched, and Shen Shuwei groaned in pain twice. She felt that if she used more force, her teeth would fall off. She rubbed her mouth with a grin, and when she saw the man she was pressing down, she didn't care about the pain, and hurriedly propped herself up, fearing that she would cause internal injuries to him as a patient. "Are you okay?" After asking, she found that this sentence was nonsense. The man's face was a little pale, his eyebrows were tightly knitted because of pain, and his narrow phoenix eyes were staring at her without blinking, as if he wanted to see through her. Shen Shuwei was afraid that something would happen to the man, and she didn't forget that he was still injured. She supported the bed and wanted to get up, but her arm was grabbed by the man and she couldn't leave. She looked at the man under her in confusion. "What's wrong?" Lin Xian held her hand tightly, fearing that she would leave if he didn't hold her. "Don't leave." Shen Shuwei looked at Xiao Jinyan, who suddenly changed his style. He disliked her and asked her to leave the previous second, but now he was overbearing and didn't allow her to leave. "I won't leave, I just get up, it will be uncomfortable to press you." Lin Xian said stubbornly, "It's not uncomfortable." "But our posture," Shen Shuwei looked down at the posture of the two. Although she often did this before, it seems a little inappropriate now. The main reason is that she is not physically strong enough. It's better to lie on him. If she supports herself with her hands, she won't be able to hold on for long before her limbs become weak. "Can I get up first?" "No." Lin Xian pulled her into his arms again. Shen Shuwei was forced to throw herself into his arms. She accidentally touched the wound on her chest, causing him to groan in pain. Shen Shuwei hurriedly propped herself up again, freed her hands to pull open his clothes to check the wound. When the clothes were pulled open, she could vaguely see a bright red mark on the white gauze. She knew without looking that it was because of the bleeding caused by the wound just now. This posture was stagnant for a long time. Shen Shuwei really couldn't hold on any longer. Her arms were sore, but Xiao Jinyan still held her hand and didn't let go. As long as she moved, he would pull her in. Xiao Jinyan's strength was not strong. Shen Shuwei could actually break free, but she let him hold her because she was afraid of touching his wound. At this time, Lin Xian's limbs were a little weak, as if he would faint in the next second, but he was just holding himself together, afraid that if he fainted, the person in front of him would disappear. Shen Shuwei found that Xiao Jinyan was a little bit wrong. When they got along well before, he never said anything like not letting her go, let alone holding her hand. She suddenly opened her eyes wide. "Do you remember who I am?" Lin Xian looked at the person in front of him, the palm-sized little delicate as a porcelain doll, and he would never forget the pair of talking starry eyes. "You are Xiaoju," he said with great certainty. Shen Shuwei laughed happily when he heard it, and hugged his neck excitedly. "You finally remembered, I thought I would have to wait for a long time." Lin Xian also laughed. "I said I wouldn't let you wait too long." Shen Shuwei felt something was wrong when he heard it. Did Xiao Jinyan say this to her? She racked her brains, thinking about every word Xiao Jinyan said to her before leaving. He said he would return safely. He also said that he couldn't bear to leave her and the babies. He also said that he really wanted to take you with him. The only thing he didn't say was this. Maybe she fell asleep and Xiao Jinyan missed it when he said it? Shen Shuwei didn't think too deeply about it. As long as he remembered her, she kissed his cheek happily. Is this the end of suffering and the beginning of happiness? Lin Xian's ears suddenly turned red when he was kissed on the cheek, and he said in a low voice. Shen Shuwei was immersed in joy, and her slender fingers stroked his handsome face. She was ignored in various ways before, and he asked her to leave. Now that he remembered her, for her, it was the end of suffering and the beginning of happiness. Jinyan, I miss you so much. Shen Shuwei felt that she was not a clingy person, but Xiao Jinyan had led the troops to fight for several months, and she really missed him. If it weren't for the baby, she would probably not be able to help but go to the front line to find him. After learning that Xiao Jinyan was in danger and fell off a cliff and was missing, she was more scared and panicked than ever before. It was also at that time that she found that she liked Xiao Jinyan more than she thought. She always put eating, drinking, and sleeping first, but she found that Xiao Jinyan had already occupied a large place in her heart. Later one day, when the two were together, Xiao Jinyan accidentally heard Shen Shuwei's inner thoughts. Xiao Jinyan is now the emperor, and he will definitely hold a beauty pageant, and there will be many beauties. If Xiao Jinyan dares to take a concubine, I dare to divorce my husband and find a gigolo. Xiao Jinyan was shocked to hear this. How dare you divorce your husband and find a gigolo? He couldn't help asking, how much do you like me? Shen Shuwei told everything and expressed her love without any concealment, especially the part about coming out to find him. Xiao Jinyan was moved by it, and at the same time, she happily forgot that she had the idea of divorcing her husband and finding a gigolo. It happened to be lunchtime, and Chengzi brought a plate of roasted pigeon. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the roasted pigeon and asked, 2 roasted pigeons and me, which one do you choose? Shen Shuwei said without hesitation, of course roasted pigeons. I haven't eaten it for a long time. 1 is not enough. 2 is just enough to satisfy my craving. There are 2 crystal elbows in front and 2 roasted pigeons in the back. He has never made a firm choice. Xiao Jinyan. This is what his wife likes, and the division is clear. I don't know if it's Lin Xian's illusion, but he feels that Xiaju seems to be crying, and he feels distressed. I made you wait too long. She was only 9 years old when they separated, and she was so big when they met again. Fortunately, her facial features have not changed much, otherwise he almost couldn't recognize her. Not long, just remember me. Shen Shuwei raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyan, smiling with curved eyebrows. Lin Xian looked at the familiar smile, and his tense nerves gradually relaxed. Shen Shuwei held the handsome face of the man, her eyes fell on his lips. Jinyan. He remembered that Xiaju used to call him brother Jinyan, but now she just called him by his name. Is it because she has grown up and is embarrassed to call him? Yes, I'm here. Shen Shuwei smiled sweetly and lowered her head to kiss his lips. Unlike the previous 2 times, this time it was a real kiss. The soft touch on his lips made Lin Xian's eyes widen. He didn't expect that Xiaju, who hadn't seen him for a long time, would be so bold to kiss him. When she was a child, she kissed on the cheek, but never on the mouth. She said kissing was something only boyfriends and girlfriends did. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 510. Shen Shuwei found that Xiao Jinyan was a little bit strange today. When they kissed before, he was more active than anyone else. But today he seemed like a wooden man? How could he resist not responding? Shen Shuwei stood up and looked at Xiao Jinyan in confusion. He turned his head away, as if he was a little disgusted. When she saw the red earlobes, she realized that Xiao Jinyan was shy. Shen Shuwei was so surprised. They were an old couple with a baby, but he was still shy. If it weren't for that familiar handsome face, she would have suspected that the man in front of her was not Xiao Jinyan. When no one was around, Xiao Jinyan didn't know what shyness was, and would only do things that made her shy. Today the sun came out from the west, and Xiao Jinyan looked shy like a teenager of 16 or 17 years old. "Jinyan, why are your ears red?" It would have been better if he didn't ask. When he asked, not only did Lin Xian's ears turn red, but his fair cheeks also turned red. He slowly turned his head to look at Xiaju, only to see the pair of sparkling eyes staring at him, embarrassed and confused. "Didn't you say that kissing is something that only boyfriends and girlfriends can do?" Shen Shuwei was confused when she heard that. Did she tell Xiao Jinyan that kissing is something that only boyfriends and girlfriends can do? Looking at Xiao Jinyan, who was so innocent, she wondered if he was stupid. Lin Xian frowned. "Who did you learn from?" Shen Shuwei had a question mark on her forehead. "Do you need to learn this?" Lin Xian found that Xiaju was much bolder than before. Seeing that she spoke so confidently, he thought that she must have been led astray by others during the years of separation. "Then why did you kiss me?" This was the point he wanted to ask. Shen Shuwei felt more and more that something was wrong with Xiao Jinyan in front of her. "Isn't it normal for a couple to kiss? Can't I kiss you?" Lin Xian hurriedly explained, "That's not what I meant." Shen Shuwei originally wanted to spend some time with Xiao Jinyan, but after being interrupted by his strange behavior, she felt sleepy. She didn't sleep well last night, and it was late at night again, so it's no wonder she was so sleepy. She yawned. "Jinyan, I'm sleepy." She got off him and lay beside him, thinking that he wouldn't chase her away tonight, right? At this time, Lin Xian was also very sleepy, but he was just holding on. After Xiaoju got off him, he was too lazy to move. When he felt sleepy, he couldn't resist it and fell asleep. Shen Shuwei waited for a long time and saw that Xiao Jinyan didn't say anything. Although he didn't chase her away, she still felt something was wrong. When they slept together before, Xiao Jinyan liked to hold her in his arms to sleep, but he didn't this time. She looked up at Xiao Jinyan with doubts, and found that his eyes were closed and his breathing was even. It was obvious that he was asleep. No wonder something was wrong, it turned out that he was asleep. Shen Shuwei moved closer to him. She hadn't slept with Xiao Jinyan for too long, and she missed his body temperature. This time, she slept very deeply because she was happy. The next day, Lin Xian had the habit of getting up early. Even if he couldn't see at first, he would get up early. He felt something was wrong when he opened his eyes, as if something was pressing on his chest, making it difficult for him to breathe. He looked up and saw a white arm across his chest. In shock, he turned his head and looked around, and saw a woman lying beside him, and this woman was Shen Shuwei, who kept calling him husband. If he hadn't drunk last night, if he hadn't injured his leg and it was inconvenient, he would have doubted whether he had done something worse than an animal when he saw Shen Shuwei sleeping beside him. Looking at the woman sleeping, she was very peaceful, her cheek was against his arm, and he rubbed it unconsciously. His mouth suddenly became dry. What happened last night? Lin Xian tried to recall last night. He only remembered that after returning from Wang Jingyuan, Shen Shuwei gave him acupuncture. He didn't remember what happened afterwards. He looked at Shen Shuwei, who was sleeping soundly, stretched out his hand and pushed her. "Wake up for me." Shen Shuwei was woken up by someone, and she snorted angrily, "What?" Then she turned over and continued to sleep with the quilt. Lin Xian's face darkened. Was she doing it on purpose, or was she really unsuspecting? He woke her up again. "Get up for me." Shen Shuwei snorted in dissatisfaction, slowly opened her sleepy eyes, and saw Xiao Jinyan. She sat up very slowly and rubbed her eyes. "Why did you wake me up so early? I'm so sleepy." Lin Xian looked at the woman whose eyes were not fully open, and spoke with a coquettish tone. His face looked a little bad. "Look, whose bed is this? Isn't the bed for sleeping, Shen Shuwei stretched and opened her eyes completely. When she saw Xiao Jinyan, she found that his face and eyes were a little strange. Lin Xian asked coldly, "Did you drug me last night?" Shen Shuwei was confused. "No, why should I drug you?" Lin Xian asked again, "Then why did you sleep in my bed? What happened last night?" Shen Shuwei was stunned for a moment, and had a bad premonition. "You don't remember?" Lin Xian said, "If I remember, do I need to ask you?" Shen Shuwei stared at Xiao Jinyan in front of him in a daze. He was very different from last night. He didn't remember it after just one night? "You still remembered who I was last night, how come you don't remember it after sleeping?" Lin Xian said, "I don't remember what happened last night, so I asked you if you drugged me." Shen Shuwei vaguely discovered that Xiao Jinyan in front of him still didn't remember him, and that Xiao Jinyan last night was also a little bit wrong. She felt a little disappointed, and the happy mood last night was gone in an instant. "I didn't drug you." Lin Xian didn't know what was going on. He had no memory of what happened last night. Now calculate the time. The maids will come in to clean up the house later. Seeing them lying together, he is fine as a man, but she is a woman who can't wash herself clean even if she jumps into the Yellow River. He urged, "Go back quickly." Shen Shuwei glanced at Xiao Jinyan in front of her with a cold face. What bitterness and sweetness are all lies. She got off the bed, picked up the clothes beside her and put them on, then put on her shoes, carried the medicine box, opened the door and walked out. Lin Xian looked at the petite figure disappearing at the door, and his brows were furrowed. He never thought that things would happen to this point. Shen Shuwei returned to her guest room with the medicine box on her back. Qin Xiao had been guarding the door since early in the morning. When he saw her coming back from the opposite side, he took 2 steps forward and asked, "Did the master stay overnight?" Shen Shuwei put the medicine box on the table and nodded listlessly, "Yeah." It was not only because she didn't sleep well, but most of the reason was because Xiao Jinyan didn't remember her again. Qin Xiao asked, "Then did the master remember?" Shen Shuwei shook her head and said sullenly, "No, I was kicked out again." Qin Xiao was confused and didn't understand what Shen Shuwei meant. "I'll sleep for a while." Shen Shuwei didn't want to think about anything now. She came to the bed and kicked off her shoes, then lay down on the bed and continued to sleep. Qin Xiao always felt that something had happened. When did the master drive the crown princess out of the room? He glanced at Shen Shuwei lying on the bed, turned around and walked out, then closed the door and stood guard at the door. Shen Shuwei was awakened by her rumbling stomach. She was too hungry. After washing up, she found that it was already noon. No wonder she was so hungry. After Shen Shuwei had lunch, she lay on the couch, took out the chocolate from the space, unwrapped it, and ate it bite by bite. Swichuan came over, saw the chocolate in Shen Shuwei's hand, licked her lips, and wanted to eat it. Shen Shuwei glanced at Swichuan, and was not stingy. She took out the chocolate from the space, unwrapped it, and gave it to Swichuan. Swichuan loved cleanliness. It came to the chair with the chocolate in its mouth and began to eat it elegantly. Shen Shuwei ate 3 chocolates in a row, rinsed her mouth and took a nap again. When she woke up again, it was already noon. Shen Shuwei went out for a walk alone. When she passed the garden, she heard someone talking. "I haven't seen you for a few years. I didn't expect to meet you again. You have become a monk. My poor master said that everything depends on fate. When fate comes, it will happen naturally." Shen Shuwei walked a few steps and fell back. Because the voice sounded familiar, she pushed aside the flowers as tall as a person, and saw 2 figures sitting in the grass pavilion. One was Wang Jingyuan, and the other was Wu Tan. She hadn't seen Wu Tan for a long time, and found that Wu Tan seemed to have matured and lost his youthfulness, just like Xiao Jinyan, who would change as he grew older. She walked out happily. "Third master, Master Wu Tan. Wang Jingyuan saw Shen Shuwei coming over and stood up, and asked in surprise, Dr. Shen, do you know Wu Tan? Shen Shuwei smiled and nodded, yes, I met him at the White Horse Temple in Daxia. She looked at Wu Tan in confusion, showing a look of surprise, Master Wu Tan, why are you here? Wu Tan was also a little surprised to see Shen Shuwei, I came to visit a friend, Shen. When he was out, Wu Tan didn't know how to call her for a while. Shen Shuwei curved his eyebrows, just call me Dr. Shen. Wu Tan nodded, why is Dr. Shen here again? Of course there is something wrong. Shen Shuwei didn't say in detail, she looked up and down at Wu Tan, saying that he seemed to have grown taller. Have you been doing well these past few years? Wu Tan clasped his hands together, I am doing well, Dr. Shen is worried about me. Wang Jingyuan saw that everyone knew each other, so there was no need for introductions. He smiled and said, let's sit down and talk first. Shen Shuwei nodded readily, okay. Wu Tan, okay. The three of them sat down around the table. Shen Shuwei picked up the pastry and put it in her mouth and took a bite. Every place has its own special pastry, and the pastries here taste pretty good. Wang Jingyuan picked up the teapot and poured her a cup of hot tea and placed it on her right-hand side. Shen Shuwei nodded and thanked him. While eating the cakes, she asked curiously, how did the third master know Master Wu Tan? Wang Jingyuan looked at Wu Tan and explained with a smile, we knew each other in Nanzhao country before, and we haven't seen each other for several years. Shen Shuwei looked at Wu Tan curiously, then did Master Wu Tan know Xiao Jinyan when he was in Nanzhao country? At this time, in the guest room, Lin Xian saw Sichuan running in and thought Shen Shuwei was here. He looked up at the door, but he didn't see Shen Shuwei. Good night, babies. Please support me with monthly tickets and recommendation tickets.